Running Sentences presents The Train Headed Nowhere. Part 4. Evidence and Problems with Evidence. Drex hopes that Lucy will keep to her word, but that only complicates Drex's life, as now he's sent out on a new job when things just don't go the way he wants them to. This story is written and narrated by Michael Henry. This is a work of fiction, so any names of characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, characters, businesses, events, and/or situations, plus fictional situations, characters, businesses, events, etc., is purely coincidental. Copyright 2024, Michael Henry. All rights reserved. After waiting around the dining room for the two to return to drop off the evidence of things, and they didn't return, Drex had gone to drive the train. It was an uneventful shift for him, with no interruptions, and when his shift ended, he decided to go straight to Domina. It was best to clear this situation and get it done with. She now sat across from him in her office, studying a few maps, as he sat there waiting for her to pay attention to him. I take it that something is wrong. Yes, Lucy claimed that she isn't a revolutionary and that she's actually trying to take out some other group aboard the train. One who is operating against what the bosses want, I guess? How cute for her. Anyway, she said my boss, Carl, is helping her out and they're going to find evidence. This made Domino look up and put down her work. She studied his expression for a moment as she sat back crossing her arms. Why would they work together? She asked coldly. I've no idea. I wasn't given that information, and I did my best not to ask since it leads to bad places. I've learned, as you can see. She frowns and shakes her head, looking over her work as he rose from his chair. And where do you think you're going? To sleep. I did my job and helped you out a little extra even though it isn't part of my job. Ah, yes. Well, I actually have good news on that front. Oh no, I don't like the sound of that. Well, that is up to you, but here it is. You're relieved of train driving except in emergency situations, and you are now a detective for their bosses. The announcement made Drex's head swim, as he felt his world collapsing around him. What had been so simple of a life was now far too complex and made no sense to him. You would only have 2 drivers if I get moved to this new position. She smiled at him for this comment. No worries on that front. We picked up one as we went past the last train station. I'm surprised you didn't even notice, since you were driving. Shaking his head, Drex tries to think back to the last shift, but comes up empty. It had been a foggy night out there, blocking his vision all around, so anything could have happened and he wouldn't have really noticed unless a buzzer and a light flashed on the dashboard. I can't say I believe you, but fine, you've hired someone new. Why would they want this new job? Drex asked, and still lost in thought about how or where somebody had gotten aboard on the train. And then he continued, but what if I don't want this new job that you're offering me? You will find yourself doing nothing and slowly or quickly becoming hated by the other workers for just sitting around. This is ridiculous, Domina. I want no part of any of it. Well, it's your choice, but I would advise against saying no. She reaches into her desk and fetches out a lacquered sort of card and tosses it across to him. Not bothering to catch it, Drex watches it land in his lap, face up. On it gave him permission to head to the passenger section of the train. He looks up to her with an arched eyebrow. I haven't said yes yet, and you're giving me this? Consider it an incentive to say yes. Also, I won't give you permission until it's scanned into the system by me. So, what do you want to do? What work would you have me be doing? Well, it is believed that someone has a bomb aboard the train. You need to go find it. And get rid of it, Drex added. Heavens no, you're a train driver, not an explosive expert. Unless you are an explosive expert and you didn't tell us in your application. He shook his head no, as quickly as he could. The last thing he wanted right now was to deal with bombs. A headache was forming all around his head as he thought about it, and the shaking was not helping. I would reject that sort of job. And if I told you that once the job was done, you would be considered a passenger and not have to work anymore? That actually sounded nice, and eased his headache a bit, but he also didn't think it sounded like it would be that simple. Why would you do that for me? Drex asked after thinking about that for a moment. Well, it is recommended in the payout handbook that it is a good reward. There is a catch? He shook his head at that thought. When had anything aboard this train made any sense? This probably wasn't going to be the last thing he had to question. Yes, there is a catch. Is that a problem? Domina asked. No, it makes sense in a train ride that never seems to end, and where everything is made up that something always comes along for the ride. Nothing is made up, and we are headed for a destination. Now I can give you the night to think about it, but after that I need an answer. Think carefully, and, of course, say yes. Having been half standing and half sitting for a while now, Drex rose to his full height, and the weight of 1,000 or so questions on his own mind kept trying to crush him back into the chair. There was little that he could do, or say, or think about, since everything kept moving. With a nod, he merely left the room. Drex would drag himself to the sleeping quarters for the engineers, bracing himself as he came in. The expectation of 2 people in there would confirm what Domina had said. He didn't want it to be true, but stepping through the door, there were 2 women in a deep conversation who both looked up when he came in. Oh, you. Yes, me, Petunia, and I'm still an engineer, sort of, and I need a place to sleep. Isn't it your shift? No, Monty quit, and we got another new person to come aboard, Petunia said simply. Really? The boss only told me 1 person. It was the only question that he had enough energy to muster, and if he was being honest, he didn't really care to know much about any of this. And, yes, really, you might be leaving us soon. No choice in that matter, thanks to our bosses. I'll be around as emergencies, but I guess not for long, maybe? They made promises, not that I expect them to keep them. Promises that they really, really probably won't keep. Without a doubt, Petunia. Who are the newbies, and how did Monty quit? There's nowhere to go aboard this train, Drex said. This one is Chris, and the other new hire is Lou, who's currently driving, and actually Monty isn't gone yet because he's with Lou, making sure nothing goes wrong. Isn't fully gone yet, but he is leaving at some point. I don't know where he will go, though, or how he will get off. Drex sat down on his cot of a bed and stared off into the distance for a moment. I should say that it is nice to meet you, Chris, and if I ever come across Lou, it will be nice to meet them as well. I need some sleep, so don't mind me if that's all I ever say to you. Taking off his shoes and not minding his clothes at all, Drex wraps himself in his blankets and passes out. A short, uneventful sleep was exactly what he needed. Though still a bit drained by it all, he made his way back to the dining car. Despite it being the late night, there were more than a few people around enjoying whatever meal they were having. Drex had come here first because he wanted to give Lucy another chance to show up. He didn't see her around and suspected she wasn't on shift, since there was a waiter here that he'd never seen before working. How's the late night evening treating you, sir? The new waiter said. Drex glances to the waiter who'd come up to him as he sat down at the counter. Do you need some food? The waiter went on, ignoring that he hadn't been answered the first time. Yes? Whatever you can make is appreciated. Are you new here? Fresh arrival from the other day. It was quite the trip to get on the moving train. Right, cool. Is Lucy around, or is her shift later today? Drex worriedly asked. Who is Lucy? The waiter responded. A waitress who works this car? Well, I know nothing about her. Sorry, I'll go get you some food. With a nod to that, Drex kept silence, since he was processing that bit of information. It didn't bode well for him, and he was sure he would be told that by Domina when he went to see her. A moment later, a plate of grey-brown food was put before him. Here you go, sir. This stuff looks worse than usual. Oh, well, much like the lady, I know nothing about that. I'm still new here, and the only thing they taught me were to press some buttons. Who taught you? I was a guy, named Corpo, I think, and I haven't seen him since. He introduced me to button pressing. Drex nods in his head, letting the worker return to their duties about the cabin. He settles into his not-so-good food, eating what was almost tasteless, but had a faint, dry garlic taste to it. It was there and then gone before he could really register. Once done, he was quick to head over to Domina's office, since Lucy did not show up during his meal. He was expecting that she might be out, since she always seemed to be in, and, well, she probably needed to rest at some point, he figured, but her voice beckoned him in as he knocked, so in he went. I take it you already know there are people missing, he said to Domina upon closing the door. It happens when we change crew, Domina said tiredly. Well, the one I wanted to look into, your believed revolutionary, Lucy is gone. Busy with her paperwork, it didn't seem to bother her as he moved to take up a seat. He waits for a moment for permission to sit, but that wasn't coming since she was so busy. So he sat down, and after a moment she put her paperwork away and began searching for something else on her desk. Finding the folder, she held it out to Drex. You need to go find her. And what is this folder, file, what is it? Her file, Mr. Detective, Domina replied. I haven't, Drex started to say. She has gone missing, and it is your fault. You let her get away, so now you have to take the job and go to the passenger section to find her. You're sure she is there? No, but that's the only place she can be if you've already searched the forward cars. He hadn't actually done that, since he'd actually expected her to show up, but he couldn't really say anything about that right now without getting into trouble. Well, I'll make a quick look about just to make sure, but it still doesn't mean I am taking this position. She frowns and glares at him. You didn't check? I was trusting that she would help out. She said she would help out, and it didn't occur to me that it might happen. Well, I'm not good at this sort of thing since I've never done it. She was supposed to come see me. With a heavy sigh, and not waiting around a moment, Domina rose from her seat and was around her desk, getting to his side. She felt her hand grab his and began to pull him up. Well, let's go search for her then. Wait, do you even have time for that? I always see you here at work. Don't you ever get a break or go to sleep or anything? Yes, I do, but now is not the time for it. We are in grave danger, Domina said as she continued to pull on him to get him to stand up. Then stop the train, Drex offered weakly. He was now standing, not of his own will, but being pulled quite strongly by Domina towards the door. At it they came to a stop as she shoved him against the nearby wall. He hit it with a bit of a thud and a surprised look on his face. We can't do that, and you know that. Stop suggesting it. We have to be able to do something. This trip seems to be going to hell and nowhere, and all I've ever done was ask a few questions, and that got me tangled up in all of this. Yes, we are going to go do something, but you keep questioning me about what we are doing. Come on, we don't have time. She pulls him out the door. Their first stop was the engine driving the train. It was quiet up here except for the new hire. The two engineers were busy talking to themselves and talking through a manual for driving the train to notice that Domina and Drex had come in. A quick once-over led them nowhere, and so they were soon out of it. The first two fuel cars they came across were empty of any sign of Lucy or Carl, though Drex wasn't sure if they were or weren't looking for him as well. They did run into one of the workers, who was displeased that they were there, but when they saw Domina, that faded away, and the search went on. The third car was likewise empty of who they were searching for, though it had an unusual number of workers trying to fix something at the fuel storage part, making it a pain to get by. Domina had eyed all of the workers, and so he followed her efforts because he felt like he had to be doing something just to be working and making sure that she wasn't going to be angry at him. Still no signs of Lucy. By the late morning, they were in the dining car that had a new server working, not the one from earlier that had served him. Drex looks about for either target, but spots no one in the now very empty car this morning. Instead, he went straight to the counter and was followed by Domina. They stood in front of the new worker who was busy polishing cups and glasses. "Excuse me, does Lucy still work here?" Drex asked. "Who?" "Lucy Golden, a waitress," Domina said. The worker looks them up and down with a shrug and a soft smile. They seem to not really care one bit. Drex points his thumb towards Domina. "This here is one of your bosses, by the way, so make sure to answer their questions." "Pleasure to meet you, miss, but I've never heard of her," this waiter said. The scrawny-looking man kept cleaning the glasses and stuff there, since no one else was around. "Shouldn't this car be filled with the morning crowd eating their breakfast and so on, even if it is the late morning?" Domina asked. "That's what the bosses told me would happen, but I guess they got it wrong, and here I was nervous as all hell about being thrown into the deep end as a new hire. You two wouldn't happen to need food, do you?" They shook their heads no and headed out. They passed by the office car, not bothering with it, at the insistence of Domina, who said that Lucy couldn't possibly be there. The sleeping car, though, they paused at the hallway and looked down the long stretch of it. "Forgive me for this, but none of this makes any sense to me." "Of course not. You think too much and ask too many questions," Domina said in response. "But that's what you want me to do now. Question this shit. Once you get into the other side, the passenger side, then yes. Here, not so much. Just follow my orders." "See, this is what's driving me crazy. It makes no sense that the only thing here about this train is that everything is supposed to be designed to make no sense. It's all some sort of elaborate thing designed to confuse the shit out of people who ask questions. You want an explanation for what this train is doing, don't you?" She turned, waving a finger in his face. "Honestly, at this point, yes and no, since it is only going to hurt me, probably." She nods. "As I've explained before, nothing is simple. We are under orders to move this train and its customers to a location that has been disclosed only to a select few. It must run or no one gets paid. Do you understand that?" she asked him. "Why would anyone want to plant a bomb to stop the train, then? What's with the revolutionaries?" "That is what we must figure out. When everything is beyond weird, it makes no sense, and, well, as you said, it doesn't make sense. We need the answers, and if we don't get them, then there's a chance that everyone aboard will die if we just sit around asking the same old questions and not moving," Domina said. "Why would the passengers die?" The rebels or terrorists don't care about all of the people aboard, but also the only ones they care about are the ones aboard that they can hurt, which is, I think, namely the government. Anyone else caught up in the war between them and the government doesn't really matter. They will go down as casualties for the greater good, I guess. Shouldn't they care? We don't deserve to be tossed to the side when we've done nothing wrong. She shrugs and begins marching down the hallway, only to stop at a nearby door. Tell that to them when you find them. Telling me does nothing for you. She enters the room to the door she was in front of, only to come back a mere minute later. Drex had barely noticed this, as he took in the moment just to breathe and think. When she reappeared, though, he snapped back. What are you waiting for? Search the other rooms. He tried to respond. With a frown, he moves a few steps forward as he passes there. Hurry up, we don't know when things will unfold for the worse. Are we sure that they will, though? Yes, we've had threats before over our customers and had trains destroyed. We know that they will do it. So again, yes, move and act first if you want to live. Now, with a jump in his step, he moves to a nearby door to him and yanks it open. Surprisingly, he figured it would be locked or something, but no, it actually opened. Hello, anyone in there? We're looking for the waitress known as Lucy. You may know her or have heard of her. I'm coming in to search for her. He steps inside and glances about. It looked much like the quarters that he knew as his own. Several cots were spread across the small room, with an area for a closet and a washroom near the door. 4 beds in total, of which 2 were taken with sleeping figures. He knocks on the bathroom door, and it opened with the force of his knock. No one was inside, and a quick peek in the closet showed it too was empty of any people. He quickly glanced over the sleeping figures and sighed and stepped back out of the room when none of them was Lucy or Carl. Back in the hallway, he took a few steps towards the next door, which was whipped open by one of the workers before he got to it. A small, impish-looking woman, tired-looking, steps out with an annoyed expression. Who are you lot? This lady demands. At least I am a simple worker doing my job I was given by the higher-ups. We're looking for a missing person. I don't care. That's fine. Would you happen to know a waitress named Lucy? She works in the dining car. Why would I know a waitress? Do I look like the type of person who knows people? Her disheveled hair that was all over the place said no, she doesn't really know people, but Drex knew better to say anything to that. I'm just hoping to find her if you can help out. Maybe I can. What does she look like? Average height, blondish hair, rather smart and quick to ask questions. Then no, I have not. She steps back in and slams the door shut to the annoyance of Drex. He still had to check that room, and he could feel the gaze of Domina, from behind him, on him. She was expecting him to go in there, and he moved over and reached for the handle. I will actually handle that one since you messed up everything. Why don't you move on to the supply car since you're not getting anywhere with people? Well, I'm trying my best, but I'm not cut out for this type of thing. We'll get better at it and quick, otherwise we all might die. You don't want that, do you? The question really didn't need to be asked or stated at all. Stepping into the first supply car, he looks about the small greeting space he'd been in before. It hadn't changed from his last time he'd been there, but like many places lately, there was a new face behind the desk, one that was too large for the whole thing, and sat hunched over it all. The man brightened when he saw him, though. Welcome to the supply depot of the train. How may I help you? There are a few people who may have come through. Lucy or Carl. They're being looked for by the bosses. Well, that doesn't have anything to do with supplies. No, it doesn't, sir. Are you going to tell me you can only tell me about supplies and not people? Drex asked, hopeful that the answer was no. Well, yeah, that is my job, and it is all that I know. So you're really new here, or you've been told about me and don't want to talk about things. Which is it? I am new here, so I don't know what you're talking about. Drex shakes his head sadly at the man. There was nothing he could do or say that would help things, and all that was left to do was wait. Or he could try and make some conversation, but he wasn't great at that, and this man didn't seem like he was going to give up anything. But he was willing to try as a new tactic anyway. So, how did you get aboard the train, and how new are you really? Very, very new, but as far as I know, I got onto the train, well, I remember hanging from the air, and then dropping onto the roof of the train as it passed by, I think, this worker said. You aren't even sure? No, I can't say for sure what happened, since when I landed, everything sort of went blank. Drex felt his expression darken as a result. There was a big mystery here, and he didn't know if it was worth it to explore it or not. He was sure he was involved, but how and why were beyond him at the moment. Oh, do you remember when you woke up, though, when you were aboard the train? Oh yes, I was in bed, and a nice man with a sneer was standing over me. To this, Drex made a motion with his finger across his cheek, and watched the man's expression as he did so. He was trying to make it look like a faint scar that sat on Carl's face, but he wasn't sure he was actually getting his point across. When the man's blank expression showed nothing, he eventually started talking again. Did he have a scar sort of like what I'm pointing at, like that? Not that I recall. No, I think I would remember if they had something like that. Well, it's very faint and hard to see unless you get close to him, and you sounded like you were close to him. Was there anything like that? Something like that? Flo continues to shake his head now to the question, to Drex's frustration. He couldn't figure out any of this, and if someone would give him a simple, easy answer, it would be appreciated. Are there any people who've come through here recently? Let's get back to that. Were there any men or women who came through here? A man and another, or how many people were come through here? Oh, actually, I can kind of remember that, but I wasn't actually on shift yet. Because a man and woman who, weren't dressed in the usual supply depot uniforms came by. He had his simple answer, but the nagging thought in his back of his mind made him question it. Easy to get to that answer, which made it questionable at best. Drex shook his head, trying to clear it of the contradictory thoughts. Wait, you didn't stop them from going further beyond this point? Did they have passes or something? Well, yes. I was getting on shift, the person who was showing me around asked to see IDs, and that in the manual, after I looked it up, because they sent me to work here, I looked it up, and it said they were okay for getting past this point. So, actually, isn't there an ID required for these types of questions? I thought I saw something about that in the little book known as the manual. The worker looked to their side, shifting about their giant size to get at something. It barely looked like he moved, but he was definitely moving, and Drex took the moment to glance behind his shoulder in a worry, since Domina had yet to show up. He had that ID, yes, but she had said he needed her to activate it, and would that actually work if needed? Yeah, take your time finding it. Found it! Now, book, where are your secrets? The worker called out. The door behind the worker opened, and out peeked a female-looking person. They said something, enough to draw the attention of Flo, who turned to them. Is there a problem? We need the books, right now. But I'm dealing with something right now. If you could wait a moment. No, they are needed it now. Drex steps forward to get a better view of this person, who still was shielding themselves behind the door. They spotted that and withdrew further into the shadow of beyond that door. Excuse me, Drex started to say. I have no reason to talk to you. My job only has me talking to whoever sits at the front desk and my boss. Who is your boss? October, this hidden woman said. And does he work with the other bosses? Drex asked. I'm not to answer any questions, so I don't know. Go away, freak. That felt completely unnecessary, and he stepped forward again, towards the door that would go into the back of the room. One hand dropped to his pocket to pull out his ID, while the other reached for the handle. I'm in the middle of an investigation, ma'am. Cooperate and there will be no trouble. Persist in degrading me, and I will be forced into action, Drex tried to explain. Will you now? Yes, Domina, I will. He cursed that he'd been too busy to notice that she'd come in, and all of this felt so wrong, since maybe it sounded like he was bullying, but he decided it would be okay if he just explained everything. This, by the way, lady is one of the big bosses, so don't think you can... It took him a moment to notice that the door had already closed, and that the woman was gone. Fuck, Drex swore. Hello, nice to meet you. Can I get you supplies, ma'am? The supply officer asked. No, thank you. We need to go beyond, if you don't mind. There is a search going on that we need to complete. And do you have permission? Dear big boy, I am permission. I go where I want, when I want, without silly questions. There was a look of doubt on Flo's face as Domina walked over to the glass that separated them. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the same sort of card that she'd given Drex and then pressed it against the glass. You might not believe me, but your little guide, that little manual on how to work, will show you what this ID means when you see it. Since the book was still in his hands, Flo flipped a few pages to find what he was looking for. Once on the right page, though, he went pale, and he looked between the two. With a nod, he said no more and merely looked straight forward. Thank you for your cooperation, the train worker said as he stared off into the distance. A quiet back of the train car hallway greets them as they step past the entrance area. The wheels and squeaks for them were all that was keeping them company at the moment. I'm not sure why you bothered to bring me along on this little job, Domina, or why you bothered to give me this ID badge, Drex said as they walked a bit down the supply car. A fool is a useful tool, and despite not being one, you are useful for getting to places and asking questions that I cannot. You easily moved through this place without me. I cannot believe that my usefulness somehow does not weigh you down in some aspect, Drex retorted. The sound of a door sliding open down the hallway drew their attention. A head peeked out and appeared to look like the lady from before, but then quickly disappeared. See? Useful, Domina said. How does a random moment make me useful? Domina was already headed towards the door and signaled for him to follow, even though he was already doing that. In a few steps, they were at the room. Hurry up and open it. I don't want her trying to escape out the window or something. I don't think the storage room has many windows except in this hallway. With one hand, he pushed the door open, sliding it to the side, and for a moment it resisted. But his strength overcame that obstacle, and it popped open to reveal a room filled with boxes, and the woman trying to move them to the side. Who are you and what are you doing? Drex demanded to know. It doesn't matter. I don't have to answer your questions. You don't work in this department and aren't my bosses, so there. Domina is a higher-up boss. You have to answer to her. He's right. It will make things go easier if you talk to us. Or what, miss? Or you'll get beat up and thrown off the train into the wastelands, Drex said, and shrugged at his own suggestion. You wouldn't beat up a woman. Drex paused at that, trying to decide if he would or wouldn't do that. His life probably relied on him doing such a task, but the idea felt icky to think about and to do.
Well, I can meet you up then if you would prefer that.
The cold tone from Domina made the room feel an iota colder than it had a moment ago. It was already a slightly chilled space, so that change, it happened, it was sort of almost unnoticeable. You're a boss, though. You can't go around doing whatever you want, this woman protested. Who says bosses can't get their hands dirty and do what they want? I relish the chance to see what my muscles can do, missy. Okay, or we can just talk it out, you two. We're seeking out a waitress named Lucy who came through here, and probably a guy by the name of Carl? Yes, or that. You can do things the boring way if you wish. And Domina added. The worker had no way out of this small room with its boxes stacked to the ceiling. Drex had come in, blocking the doorway while Domina stood behind him. I don't know anyone by those names, but I did see a few people come by. A few people? More than two? How many? Finally catching the name tag on her blouse and seeing the name Cordial glinted in the light of the room, Drex thought about adding that name once the woman had cast a glance upward, catching it as she was thinking about the question. 3 people, I think. 2 women and a man. Did one have blonde hair and the other guy have a slight if terrible scar that you can barely see? Drex asked her. How the fuck am I supposed to know if they had a scar or not? I didn't get close. As for blonde hair, yes, I think I recall blonde heads. And which direction were they headed? Miss Cordial, Domina asked through gritted teeth. Cordial, with one hand, points off towards the passenger cars. In a very slow, leisurely stroll, they went that way. Since they now had a direction, Drex began backing out of the room, expecting Domina to follow. She was behind him after all, but he found himself exiting first, while she remains where she is, and slams the door shut as he exits. End of part 4 of The Train Headed Nowhere. Thank you for listening.